This is the All Rev'd Up podcast, and I'm Reverend Emmett Price.
And I'm Reverend Irene Monroe.
Irene, after our last episode, we hit 70,000 downloads, and I am wondering, I'm just wondering now, with 2 more episodes left in season 3, can we hit 100,000 downloads this season?
Well, listen, I don't know. I'm elated by the 70,000 that we have. I'm hoping that we get 100,000. And one of the ways that we might can do it, I'm reaching out to our listeners. Tell your friends, your families to get all revved up with Emmett Price and with Reverend Irene Monroe.
That's right. Tell your mama and them, tell your cousins, tell your coworkers, have everybody listen to the All Rev'd Up podcast. And let's see if we can get to 100,000 downloads together. Well, before we head into our conversation on the Tulsa Massacre, an American dream decimated, let us thank each and every one of our listeners and viewers for your support, your encouragement, your feedback, your reviews, and your comments.
Yeah, listen, this is my plug again. If we get 100,000, it's going to be more than a tsunami of thanks to you all here. But let me first thank our producers, Cavante Smalls and Kyla Wright.
We have amazing producers. So grateful, so grateful.
Indeed.
Well, Irene, 100 years ago, a deputized mob of white folk decimated the 35 to 36 block Greenwood neighborhood of Tulsa, Oklahoma, also known as Black Wall Street. With the decimation of the neighborhood, the dreams of a thriving, flourishing economic, social, and professional community of brilliant black folks inspired by Booker T. Washington and his concept of racial uplift was also decimated, sparked by a loose and unproven story of rape. This historic event has been quietly hidden from the public, from the educational curricula, and from the world for the past century. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts?
Listen, Emmett, it's really interesting. The enormity of the subject really just overwhelms me because it's not only painful, but it is frustrating in terms of, 100 years now, we're still asking for reparations. But I think what really bothers me, there's so many things that bothers me. I'm bothered by the media in terms of how they just sort of take black pain and it becomes trauma porn, and the people who are even consuming it. It's almost like it's a movie that you turn on and you can just turn off. I'm troubled by sort of the commercialization of the 100th anniversary of this event, and there's no movement towards reparation. And then I'm just really pissed with the Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission that want to commemorate it with a park and a museum, okay, but not focus on the survivors, which is Mother Viola Fletcher, who's 107, her brother, who's 100 years old, that is Hughes Van Ellis, and then there's a 106-year-old survivor, and that's Leslie Benningfield Randall. So it really bothers me how the focus is on a park and a museum, but not on the folks that survived and their descendants in terms of reparation. And then the other thing that bothers me, Emmett, is this, that most Americans, unfortunately, black as well as white, has come to know about the Tulsa riot through pop culture. First in 2019 because of The Watchman that was on HBO, and then on HBO again the TV series Lovecraft Country. So I'm just troubled by it, particularly because this was really kind of what I would describe as a self-contained flourishing hub. It was the center of black commerce and culture. And let me just say some of the things that were lost here. 191 businesses, a junior high school, several churches, the only black hospital in the district. Listen, when we think about poverty today in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 35% of the blacks are below the line, where 10% are below the line. It just really troubles me that the damage was done. They were saying like $1.5 million of 1921 dollars, and that's close to like 33 million today. but the whole idea is that what would Tulsa look like today if it wasn't singed, and it would be flourishing even better than Hotlanta. Can you
Mm-hmm.
imagine that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's the stuff that bothers me about, we everybody is pimping on it. People wanted to make it a tourist attraction. There's a mural up there in Tulsa. People will pay commission to go into the museum, but yet none of the proceeds will go to the family. The very district that Greenwood was on is sacred land. Um, None of that land is going to be given back to those people. But the interesting thing is this, that had been asked many years, where were the bodies buried? Where were the bodies buried? And so, in 2001, we had 118 survivors. Now we just have only three. The issue with reparations is says, well, we have no living survivors. There's an intentionality to let the people die off so that they don't have to pay reparations.
So let me get in here just with a little bit of contextualization, a little bit of history here, because many folks don't realize that in this time period, lynching was hot and heavy, the Ku Klux Klan was hot and heavy, and there had been many massacres. I mean, just in less than a 10-year period, you had a massacre in East St. Louis in 1917. You had
Mm-hmm.
one in Chicago in 1919. Also in 1919, you had one in Elaine, Arkansas,
The latest
and
one,
in
right?
Washington, D.C. And then the one that we learned about through a movie starring Ving Rhames was Rosewood in 1923. And so you had a whole lot of massacres, all of which are mostly unknown, certainly not included in the curriculum in this nation. And then you have this situation where you have a 19-year-old African American black man by the name of Dick Rowland, who apparently was going into the hotel because the
Elevator
highest
operator.
floor
Yeah, yeah.
the highest floor in the hotel was where the colored bathroom was.
That's
So he
right.
had to take the elevator, where had a white elevator operator by the name of Sarah Page. And there's all kind of speculation in terms of their relationship. Did they know each other? Did they not know each other? But some spectators saw him kind of running out or tripping out or moving out of the elevator, and Sarah screamed, and then
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden he was accosted for rape, and
That's
then he
right.
was taken to the jailhouse under the auspices of going to be lynched. And then a mob of angry white folks
As
showed up
usual.
at the jailhouse to make sure that he got lynched.
Mm-hmm.
And they came in numbers of hundreds. And so there was a population of black folks who were saying this is absolutely not fair.
No.
So they gathered at
Mm-hmm.
the jailhouse to actually help the police, to help the sheriff and the deputies to protect this person. And then the white mob were deputized.
That's right. That's right.
And
And
somebody tried to disarm a black person. A shot was fired,
the
and then,
audacity.
as the narrator says, as the historian says, all hell broke
Broke loose.
loose.
That's right. And then one of the things we got to understand, so why were these massacres occurring, at the beginning of the 20th century? Well, one is that there's the end of Reconstruction.
That's
Number
right.
two, the end of World War One. Now, you got to understand, these are black folks who survived the 1918 pandemic, okay,
Mm-hmm.
that they call the Spanish flu. But the interesting thing about Tulsa that people didn't understand here is that Tulsa was an oil-rich area, the north and the south. It just so happened the blacks lived much on where the oil was. So there was an intentionality. I guess they would call it today gentrification. We just call it straight up lynching and singeing of people
Yeah.
here. But the thing that also bothers me is that when we talk about internment, we always think about, particularly about reparations, we think about the Japanese, and we certainly, history has shown us that the Holocaust survivors have certainly
Mm-hmm.
got reparations. And then one of the things we also understand is that the 9/11 survivors and their descendants got some form of reparation. The interesting thing when we talk about internment, people don't understand that the survivors, the people that did survive, that massacre were interned. Well over 40,000 black people were in internment
Yeah.
camps here. And
Yeah.
so that is the first example of black people being American citizens. Let me just say this,
Yes.
being interned here. But the interesting thing when you think about Black Wall Street, and you're right, it's so built up on Booker T's, philosophy of self-reliance and
Hmm.
Black economics. We got to understand that during that time, his philosophy was in contestation with W.E.D. Du Bois. But
Yeah.
but his philosophy is the reason why Black Wall Street exists.
Yes.
Black Wall Street exists, and it consists of, and it became a model too of black middle class enclaves within Black segregated Jim Crow America. Here, it
Yeah.
consists of professionals, but a very well known person, an historian who just died recently, John Hope Franklin, was a baby when this
Yes.
happened, but his father, known Buck Franklin, was an attorney, civil rights lawyer who wrote a 10-page paper that is now in the Smithsonian Museum, talks about the horror of this. But my question to you is, what bothered me about is that we knew about this, but
Hmm.
it just bothers me that we come to know it if we so happen to be watching HBO series The Watchmen.
Hmm.
And it also bothers me that we happen to know it if we are watching, Lovecraft Country. And the interesting thing, it does two things, because those are dystopian sci-fi dramas here,
Hmm.
which is it's placed rightly there. But the interesting thing is that the commissioner, I'm not the commissioner, the commission, the Tulsa Commission, along with the governor, is against critical race theory. Yet again, they want to commemorate the 100th anniversary. How do you commemorate the
Yeah.
anniversary of a tragedy and you don't insert race in it?
Yeah, I mean this is a sense of cognitive dissonance, where folks want the fruit but don't want to take care of the tree that nurtures, that blossoms, and provides the fruit. The one thing about the Tulsa entire situation in the Greenwood neighborhood and Black Wall Street was being created at the same time that Black Harlem was being created.
That's
And
right.
that's this same period. And many folks know about Black Harlem, but most folks don't know about Black Wall Street. And that's on purpose, though.
That's right.
See, Black Harlem was seen as being the product of white beneficiaries and white patrons in terms of the artistic and cultural
And the white
side of that,
savior,
and the white
the
savior.
white savior,
Absolutely.
because it's the whole part of the Harlem Renaissance.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
when you look at Tulsa, these folks actually were educated. These folks actually were phenomenal human beings who were professionals, dentists, lawyers, bankers,
Hmm.
etc., who were not only focused on arts and culture, because that was there too, but they were focused on economic uplift and creating a space and creating a sensibility that they as citizens could also benefit and flourish in this their country. You got
Yeah.
me all hot and
Yeah.
bothered around the
Yeah.
collar. Irene, we got to take a break. We got
I
to
know
take a
we do.
break. We're,
I know
we're
we
coming
do, but
back on the other side of this break.
it's a shame we don't have. It's a shame we don't have any more Black Wall Streets throughout the
I'm
country.
telling you that. I'm
Okay.
telling you that. This is the All Rev'd Up podcast. We'll be right back.
My name is Viola Ford Fletcher. I'm the daughter of Lucinda Ellis and John Wesley Ford of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm the sister of Hughes Van Ellis, who is also here today. I'm a survivor of the Tulsa Race Massacre. 2 weeks ago, I celebrated my 107th birthday. Today, I'm visiting Washington, D.C. for the first time in my life. I'm here seeking justice, and I'm asking my country to acknowledge what happened in Tulsa in 1921.
This is the All Rev'd Up podcast, and we are back. The voice you just heard was Mother Viola Fletcher, 107 years old, survivor of the Tulsa Race Massacre, seeking justice with her brother Hughes Van Ellis, 100 years old, and Mother Leslie Benningfield Randall, 106 years old, as they gave testimony at the House Judiciary Committee hearing not too long ago. Irene, 100 years later, this woman, phenomenal woman, has been reflecting on this incident for 100 years, and we are still seeking justice and repair.
Yeah, what's very, very interesting? I was very moved by it. I mean, the clarity of voice and thought and just her energy that she brings and the respect that she brings in this particular moment here. I said to myself, she's done a whole lot of living and she's seen a whole lot of trauma. And for her to be 107 and still be asking to be acknowledged. It's very interesting. I was watching the NBC nightly news the other night, and she said to the interview, she says, this stays with me. It's something that you never forget. But I remember this quote. She says every evening she thinks she might have a reason to run and has been thinking about that for 100 years. Now, that is trauma. Every evening, she says, that means that when the sun goes down, there's that moment of fear that comes, upon her. And one of the things I try to say to folks, our trauma is threefold. It's acute, it's chronic, and it's generational. Acute because, we're living in a pandemic right now. Chronic because of police brutality or white mobs, and generational because how that trauma has lived through her, listen, a generation of people, and so it just really troubles me that here is this moment where she says, I need you to acknowledge. I need America to acknowledge this. Made me think of Langston Hughes' poem, I Too Sing America, Harlem Renaissance poet, of the 1920s. The thing that she says, the operative word that she says in there, acknowledge. And the question I want to ask you, Emmett, how do you make white people acknowledge the damage that is done? Because, see, I want restitution, I want reparations, and I want rehabilitation. I want that. And it's not, wait, and hurry up, as you would say. I want it because I want it before she goes. She's been waiting for, listen, if you've been waiting for 100 years, how much, really? But I think the thing that I want to ask you here, and because I'm troubled with this, how do you get people to acknowledge it in a time that we're living where we talk about fake news, alternative facts? Rudy Giuliani says the truth is not the truth. We're fighting against critical race theory as a legitimate scholarship. Classic example, Nicole Hannah Jones, okay, the 1619 project that would help us move forward with the kind of rehabilitation and restoration about it, couldn't get tenure. Come on, Emmett, at her alma mater. This is a MacArthur awardee as well as help me, Emmett. How do you make folks wait? But by the way, and if you have that answer, help me to tell the other half of white America that Biden won the election. Come on, work with me, brother.
Look, Irene, now you know better than all of this. I don't have any solutions to this foolishness and this ludicrous behavior by individuals who would continue to disparage and mistreat. I don't even know how you mistreat a 107-year-old woman. I just don't even know how you do that. But to your point, there has been a commission for many years. Back in 1996 at the 75th anniversary, they tried to do some stuff. They tried to do some stuff again.
John
And
Conyers.
they tried to, and I remember this way. When I first moved to Boston, which would have been, around 2001, and I had the privilege of getting a chance to meet, attorney and professor Charles Ogletree.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Tree, as we call him,
yeah.
and I was naive. I was asking him, Tree, had you ever met Johnny Cochran? Because, I'm starstruck from Los Angeles, and Johnny Cochran, the O.J. Simpson attorney. And Tree said, man, matter of fact, I just got off the phone with him because we're working on some stuff in Tulsa.
Right.
And I didn't realize that when the commission came back, I think in 2001, one of the first things that they had on their list of 7 or 8 or 9, 10 things to do was to offer reparations to the survivors, offer collegiate scholarships, try to figure out where the mass graves were, and to do all these things. And the commission came back and made these recommendations, and the state of Oklahoma refused to do any of that. So Charles Ogletree, the great attorney, and Johnny Cochran, the great attorney, teamed up in order to appeal. And of course, the appellate court said that you only had 2 years to file a claim, which meant that claim would have had to been filed back in 1923.
Yeah.
So it's
Isn't that
absolutely
absurd?
ludicrous.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's absolutely
Yeah.
absurd.
See, these are the kind of laws that we get tripped up on because again, and this is the thing, it's an unjust law. And so why don't we tell the truth? Because it's really we got to find another way to really not only pay respectful homage to the survivors, because if anything, they should be front and center and not like trauma porn. Like how look how downtrodden, how traumatized they are. But I think that what we got to understand here is because it's within that bigger sort of heading of reparations. If anybody should receive reparations, this is a classic example of this.
Yeah.
I have a problem with this is a woman for 100 years is asking for it. And and others have received it much faster. I do think though, again, if we cannot get an American curriculum that brings in the history, at least for Tulsa. I mean, there are a lot of Tulsans, black and white, don't know that this has happened here.
Yeah.
So this becomes a problem because again, you can once they die, they will say we have no leverage because the whole idea of why we can't give reparations as descendants of slaves, they said, well, are any living slaves alive? How do we know that there are your descendants? There are no records taken or kept. These people have deeds of their home. They got records. I mean, John Hope Franklin's dad, Buck Franklin, wrote a 10-page document
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
So we need to tell the truth about how white supremacy find ways to not take accountability.
You
Really?
know, the other piece about this, and we didn't mention this in the first part when we were kind of giving the historical piece, but all of these individuals remember airplanes with
Mm-hmm.
people shooting out of the airplanes and firebombing the neighborhoods, which
Mm-hmm.
is how you get 35 to 36 blocks of devastation. So not only was this orchestrated, and of course you bring in the National Guard to put the whole thing down, but you had white people who were part of the white mob who
Deputized. Let's
who were
say that. They were
deputized, right? They
deputized.
were agents of the state when they
That's
did
right.
this,
That's
but
right.
they used their private planes
That's right.
to decimate the neighborhood and shooting from the air.
Black
So
people.
and so I
That's
don't
right.
even understand how in our moral aptitude, particularly a year later after the murder of George Floyd, and we have all of these virtue posturing statements and these aspirational moral statements, how folks cannot at least acknowledge as this 107-year-old woman, that's all she's asking.
Yeah.
She
But
wants justice and
yeah.
she wants acknowledgement.
But what she tells me and what Black Wall Street tells me and what Booker T. Washington, and it's so funny because we used to make fun of Booker T.
Yeah, we
Washington.
did. Yeah, 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 yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
because it's the whole
yeah.
idea that we're far more sophisticated than that, and we're gonna go with W.E.B. Du Bois,
WB. Yep.
who ends up leaving the country and going to
Yeah.
Ghana. Du
Yeah.
Bois, Booker T. stayed here, but I'm beginning to see it with a younger generation of Blacks entrepreneurial, self autonomous, okay, uplift here.
Yeah.
And so let's tell the truth, and as they say, and shame the devil. We do live in segregated America. The
Yeah.
laws are not for us. They're all antiquated. It's going to take a good while before we dismantle them, if at all. But we can survive and have many more Black Wall Streets. Okay, we see how Hotlanta is doing it. It ought not to be the other. I mean, and what happens with Hotlanta is that their doctors, that their dollars, their businesses circle within that bubble, that enclave. It stays within a Black bubble of entrepreneurship. We listen. We're not safe if we live in white neighborhoods. Okay, I'm a classic example living up in here. Okay,
Hmm.
we're not safe. Okay, when we don't work together as a community. And you've talked about the whole idea of Black entrepreneurship. We got to
Yeah.
move in that direction now, and we have the critical mass to do so.
We have the critical mass to do so. Well, listen, as we close this uh, episode, as we do each episode, we often give a benediction. Today, I just need to ramble a little bit and do a muse, and we'll call it a benediction, but I need to get some stuff off of my chest. So please endure and take an ear, as they used to say. From the white mob attacking the Greenwood neighborhood of Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921, to the white mob attacking the Capitol in Washington, D.C. in 2021, there is something wrong when violent acts against democracy are normalized and seen as nothing out of the ordinary. As Tulsa Massacre witness Mary E. Jones Parrish wrote, "The nation must awaken." This is the title of her 1923 account that was published, but not widely distributed. The same way that many of the courageous narrators of their own experiences of the awful events of the decimation of Black Wall Street could not find audiences willing to hear, let alone see, these traumatized citizens as human beings seeking empathy, compassion, redress, and repair. From the events of Tulsa to the 1943 race riots in Detroit, to the 1985 MOVE bombing in Philadelphia, to the 2015 massacre at Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, Black folk have been denied the rights of citizenship, equality, inclusivity, and have continually been denied the inalienable rights declared and articulated in 1776, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. From Emmett Till to Trayvon Martin, to Michael Brown Jr., to Sandra Bland, Eric Gardner, and George Floyd, and so many more talented, gifted, and beautiful Black people whose lives were not only taken, but their legacies disparaged by countless people aiming to attack their character, and by extension, the very equality we seek. And let us not forget our dear sister Breonna Taylor. We still want justice for Breonna Taylor. Tulsa represents a dark past that has been swept under the carpet of forgetfulness, only to come out 100 years later unsolved and unreconciled. In 1963, on the Mall of Washington, D.C., Dr. King spoke on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, saying it is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. He continued, instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. From 1963 to the twindemic of COVID and white supremacist-induced racism, America is still writing rubber checks. Beloved, from Rodney King's invocation, "Can we all just get along?" to Jesse Jackson Sr.'s admonition, "Keep hope alive," we are weary and worn down. Weary from having to fight for that which is already ours, and worn down from having to coddle the fragile fears and suckle the passive support of those who should be our most fierce and kindred allies. Today, my request is simple. Can we choose to treat others as we desire to be treated, or simply get out of each other's way so that we can live in peace? I choose the former. What do you choose? Ashe?
Ashe.
Amen.
Amen.
All Rev'd Up is brought to you by us, the Revs. Our amazing producers are Kyla Wright and Cavante Smalls.
Music from this episode is from Reverend Price's son, musical prodigy, Emmett G. Price IV. All Rev'd Up is distributed by GBH.
Additional thanks to Bob Kempf, Elizabeth O'Brien, May He, Chelsea Mers, Meredith Neerman, and Zach Waldman.
If you like what you hear, let us know. Give us a review on Apple Podcasts and follow us at All Rev'd Up Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.
And feel free to send us a note, a question, or a comment at allrev'duppod@gmail.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks for another episode of All Rev'd Up.